Okay, so good evening, everyone. This is our third session of Avelut as part of the Semicha program, and so far we've had an introduction going through biblical texts, and then going through some Tannaitic texts, and the theme that we were paying attention to is the development of halacha and practices, and understanding that a lot of what we do around Avelut and mourning has to do with the social norms and how we show respect to the community. There are several levels of respect. There is respect for the community, there's respect for the deceased, there's respect for the mourners, for the relatives, and all these things have to be taken into account. So today we're going to start going systematically through the Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to share the screen, and if you're not with us now live, but rather listening to this later, you should know you open the Shulchan Aruch, Yoreh De'ah, chapter 335 and on, and we're just going in the order of the Shulchan Aruch with some commentary, speaking about what is relevant today and things that have changed and their applications, ramifications. So, Siman 335, the title of the Siman is Matai Mevakrim HaCholeh Ve'eze Cholim Mevakrin V'chetzav Yitpalim Alav. It's actually before Avelut. We're talking about the end of life, and that is when to visit a sick person, whom should be visited, and how do you pray for a person. And have in mind, I think we mentioned before that, thank God, medicine has evolved so much in our day and time. In the past, when the Talmud speaks about someone who's sick, their understanding was that if 3 days passed and that person did not recover yet, he's as well as dead. I mean, he's on his way to the world to come, to Olam Haba. So all you can do is pray and comfort him, etc. And therefore, also, if someone fell ill and then recovered, he would say Agomel, because the understanding was that he has no chances of survival. So in Saif Aleph, entry 1, it says it's a mitzvah to visit the sick. The relatives and friends can come immediately, and those who are not so close with that person have to wait until after the third day. But if it was a illness that came as a surprise, meaning he fell ill dramatically, everybody could visit him immediately, and that has to do with the perception of the sick person. The one who is ill, if everybody will come to visit him on the first day, he will say, "Oh, God forbid, I'm doomed. Everybody thinks I'm going to die." So we give him some time, some quiet time, and then after 3 days, if he's still there, we're going to visit. Of course, this is not exactly relevant today. Depends on where the person is, what the rules of the hospital. We have to respect that. Sometimes you could do it through phone or text, but the idea of keeping in touch and keeping company is extremely important. In Saif Bet, they say, even an older person or someone who's more respectful should visit someone who's not at the same social status, even if you don't like that person that much. We even have such discussion. So the Hagar, Rabbi Moshe Yisraeli says, some people say that if someone you really dislike have fallen ill, you could go visit him. But he said, I don't think so, because that person who is ill will interpret it as a mockery, that God forbid you rejoice in what happened to him. So all this has to do with sensitivity, how we understand the social construct. In Saif Gimel, it's also something that is not relevant today, but it's important to know how they lived. When you visit someone who's sick, you don't sit on a bed or a chair or a bench, but rather you wrap yourself and you sit in front of him, because the divine presence hovers above him. That is, explains Rabbi Moshe Yisraeli, when that sick person is lying on the ground. That was the practice. People would lie on the ground, and it's important to have in mind when we'll talk about Shiva and people sitting on the ground. Remember, we spoke about the bed, etc. They also, in Saif Dalet, the Shulchan Aruch says, you don't visit early in the morning, not late in the day. Not early in the morning because people feel better than that time, and you wouldn't feel that you need to pray for him. Not later in the day, because then the illness becomes more severe, and then you wouldn't pray at all. Again, all these things have to do with the perception and understanding of illness as it was back then. Today we know that you don't visit early in the morning because that's the time for the doctor's visit, and as I said before, we have to take into account the request of the family or of the person who is ill. Saif Zayin is important. אומרים לו שייתן דעתו על ענייניו, אם ילווה או הפקיד אצל אחרים, או אחרים ילוו הפקידו אצלו, ואל יפחד מפני זה מהמוות. We remind the person who is ill to think about his business and to think whether he borrowed money or deposited money, and whether others gave him money to keep, etc., to be able to conclude all his businesses before he passes away. So this obviously speaks. This whole saif doesn't speak about just fever, though at the time fever could have been fatal for many people. But we speak about someone who's terminal. We know that he's not going to survive, or we fear that. So we mention that thing, and that is actually I'm telling. Actually, everyone, myself included, and especially people who are chaplains and going to be rabbis, that this is something that is important to tell people. Many people have all their businesses, either one of the spouses conducts the businesses, or one person only has passwords and accesses to everything, and God forbid something happens, and a lot of things remain locked out for the rest of the family. And there are ways to take care of it today. There are websites that lock all your passwords and information and release it in case something happens. This is something that is worth considering, to make sure that other people have access to our private businesses in case something happens. Of course, unless we are spying for the Soviet Union or something like that, then keep it private. That was joking, just in case someone from the FBI is listening to the Semicha program. Okay, Saif Het, interesting. Someone who has digestive problem or eye disease or head disease, didn't even know what to call it. So you don't visit if it's a digestion problem, because people would be embarrassed to be seen not in a compromising situation. Someone who has an eye disease or problem with their head, as they called it, would have a severe headache, so they're not in a situation to talk to people. So again, it's all about sensitivity. Saif Tet, and very important, not only in the context of Bikur Holim or Avelut, but in every aspect of Halakha. It's an extremely important concept that we have to pay attention to. It says this: Mevakrin Hole Ovdei Kochavim Mipnei Dachei Shalom. You go to visit the non-Jews who fell ill because of Darchei Shalom. Darchei Shalom means that we need to keep maintain good relationships with non-Jews. So I'll stop the screen share for a second. I want to see everyone. This halakha and many other halachot that deal with non-Jews, including, for example, Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbat, saving the life of someone who's in danger on Shabbat, that the halakha says that you take care, and we'll talk about it Chot Shabbat, but I feel it's important to mention it now also. The halakha says that you're allowed to transgress Shabbat to save the life of a Jew on Shabbat, and you do it also for a non-Jew because of the Darchei Shalom. So the reason you save a Jew is because you have to save a life. The reason you save a non-Jew is because you don't want to upset the non-Jews who will think that you don't care about them. And in some circles, this is still being taught as the rule on Shabbat. Doctors or EMTs or members of Hatzalah in some places are being told, if you get a phone call, you answer right away, because, but not because you're obligated to save that life on Shabbat, but rather because of the Chei Shalom, because we don't want to upset the non-Jews around us. And that appears in other places, just as Bikur Holim, visiting the sick, also providing for the poor, burying the dead, etc., etc. So what we have to have in mind with all these halachot is that, they really all stem from Pikuach Nefesh, the idea of Pikuach Nefesh, of saving one's life, and saving one's life on Shabbat. And what we take today for granted, that you are allowed to transgress Shabbat to save a life, was not so simple in the time of the Mishnah. Actually, up until the time of the Maccabim, maybe 150 years before the Common Era, the common sense dictated that Shabbat overrules everything, and people did not fight back on Shabbat. It is well documented. The Greeks knew that. They realized that they could wage war on Shabbat and nobody will fight back. So it took the rabbis time to convene and decide on these issues. This is mentioned in Masechet Sanhedrin. It says that the rabbis got together and raised the question of when, in what situation do you have to sacrifice your life to protect the mitzvah? And the Gemara there says Nimnu vegamru. They counted, they voted on it. And when we say that they voted on it, it means that it was not a simple halacha up to this point. They voted on it, and they decided that if one is being told, we're going to kill you, or you have to transgress a certain mitzvah, in all things, ya'avor v'al yareg, one would rather transgress than die, with the exception of paganism, idolatry, adultery, and murder, but not Shabbat. And they also, at the same time, coined the phrase v'hai bahim, that based on the mitzvot, you have to keep the mitzvot and live for them. So they said, halal alav Shabbat achad kadesh yishmor Shabbatot harbeh. It's okay to transgress one Shabbat for that person in order to save him, so he could keep many Shabbatot. It sounds strange today, but take into account the science of medicine back then. If you would have called a doctor 2,000 years ago to someone who was ill on Shabbat, most probably the doctor wouldn't be able to do much that you couldn't do yourself, or to do something that involves Hilul Shabbat. It was a rare situation where someone would be in a life endangering situation on Shabbat, unless there was war. So it wasn't really a very common thing, and people didn't think about that. Once they started thinking about it, they realized that that's the halacha. But for them, it was a huge hidush to say we allow you to transgress Shabbat. It's not a simple thing. So they limited it only to Jews, because at the time when this halacha was coined, when this halacha was decided upon, as I mentioned, with a vote, the non-Jews that surrounded the Jewish community were all hostile. So to tell someone, not only you're going to transgress Shabbat, you're going to do it for someone who's probably going to kill you later on, seemed strange. So they said, you save a Jew for the sake of saving his life, you save a non-Jew just to maintain good relationships with your neighbors. Today, there's no question that we have to reevaluate this halacha, and not just disregard and say, what does it matter? Anyway, we help everyone. Because that's what I heard from some people who are involved with Hatzalah or other organizations, and they say, but what does it matter? At the end of the day, we will save anyone, Jew or non-Jew. What does it matter why we do that? The answer is that if we tell people that we save a Jew because we have to save his life, we save a non-Jew because we want to keep peace and quiet with our neighbors, that means that we put a different price and a different value for the life of a Jew or a non-Jew, and that must be changed. That must be understood, that we save the life of anyone on Shabbat without asking questions, and we don't hesitate. So when we come back to this halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, again, as I said, we are in Shulchan Aruch Yoreh De'ah, chapter 335, and we were reading Seif Tet. Mevakrin holei ovdei kochavim b'nei dachei shalom. You visit a non-Jew who is ill because of dachei shalom. the halacha today is it's not b'nei the shalom because it's a mitzvah to visit the sick, to visit the ill, to help anyone who's sick anywhere around the world, to do whatever we can. Seif Yud says that speaks about whether a woman could take care of a man can take care of a woman when they're ill. The interesting that the commentators interpret that as something that have to do with sexual arousal, which is obviously not the case. Some say that if they will be exposed or revealed to each other, they will be aroused, and it will happen to a man, not to a woman. This is not the case. The halacha originally had to do with the level of embarrassment and inconvenience that one would feel, and a woman would feel very inconvenient when the man would take care of her, when it's not exactly the opposite. But when it comes to modern halacha today, there people of both genders take care of people of both genders. It's understood as something that is done on a professional level. We go to Siman, to the next chapter, 336, which applies to some of our participants tonight who are doctors, and that's an interesting discussion in the Gemara. The Saif Aleph says, "Natna Torah reshut larofe lerapot umitzvahi." The Torah gave permission to the doctor to heal people. That is based on a pasuk in Parashat Mishpatim that speaks about damages. Rak shivto yiten verapo yerapeh. That if someone caused damage to another person, he must pay for the days that person missed from work, and he also has to heal him. But because the word is repeated, verapo yerapeh, heal, he shall heal him. The Talmud says, "Natna Torah reshut larofe lerapot." The Torah gave a permission to the doctor to take care of patients, and that stems from a somewhat negative opinion that the rabbis had about doctors. Again, I apologize to the doctors in the class that they say atov sheba rofim lagehinom, that they said the best doctors should inherit Gehinom. It's not a very positive view. Not everybody thought that way, but that has to do again with the level of science of medicine back in the time. The level of the success rate was very low, just in cases that were really treatable by what the doctors could do at the time. And the rabbis wanted to sort of like put the doctors in their place to say you're not replacing God. You don't hold life and death in your hand. But it developed some kind of a negative attitude. It says bichlal pikuach nefesh, and it is considered pikuach nefesh, to be a doctor, to save other people's lives, is a mitzvah of pikuach nefesh, of taking care of someone's life. And if a doctor declines to take care of a patient, is considered a murderer. Even if there is someone else who could heal that person, because sometimes one doctor could diagnose a situation better than others. And that goes back to something that we mentioned before about a Kohen who wants to study medicine, that some rabbis do not allow that, because they say this Kohen, as a doctor, will touch the tum'ah of a dead body. And others say that, they find, Rabbi Goren found this legal fiction of holding on to something that touched the body when he was touching a dead body. But Rav Mesas and others say, here, the Shulchan Aruch says very clearly, Bichlal pikuach nefeshu, to be a doctor is to fulfill the mitzvah of saving lives. So it doesn't matter if that person is right in front of us and he's sick, or if we know that when I study for 7 years or more, and I become a doctor, and then I can take care of people, I know that people will be there waiting for me. So that's pikuach nefesh. So the halacha is that a Kohen who wants to become a doctor is allowed to do so. Okay, so we have this question that is not directly related to the halachot of pikuach nefesh, seemingly, right? and that is it okay to transgress Shabbat in order to study in college to be a doctor, right? So that's a good question. The question is what is the definition of transgressing Shabbat when you're in college, right? What is exactly that we do which is forbidden? So and of course depends on the university. Many universities, many colleges would accommodate Jewish students, observant students. I don't know how far they classes are being given on Shabbat, but let's say there's a certain session that has to be done on Shabbat. So if one cannot miss that session, the right thing to do would be to learn the halachot of what is the level of transgression and what is it that he's doing. So, for example, if you can avoid writing, that would be the best thing. You could use if you need to be at that lecture and if you could record it, or if you could dictate like your notes and using just voice into and that is, by the way, also recommended for doctors in hospitals who don't want to transgress Shabbat. They don't need to write. They could use an iPad. That is at best is rabbinical prohibition, and it is for a doctor who doctors and nurses who work in the hospital. Any action that slows them down could result in pikuach nefesh. So if you visit, for example, hospitals in Israel, you will see that they try to make sure that on Shabbat there will be non-Jewish doctors and nurses there, or at least non-Jewish workers who help the doctors take notes, etc. But overall, it becomes a burden on the system. It also becomes a burden on the doctors, and it's just like a traffic jam. 10 seconds per doctor, per patient would accumulate and eventually would cause a delay that could really prevent saving someone's life. So this is not recommended. Using an iPad or for the doctor or for a student to dictate into it would probably be okay. If it's about how you transport, how you get to the college or to where the class or session is being held, I did a series on that on Spreaker, but I'll briefly say that one can use non-motorized means of transportation, such as bicycle or if it's really good, rollerblade or roller skate, but could also use public transportation such as metro or buses with magnetic cards, because the magnetic cards are not considered electricity and one could use them on Shabbat. This is also the ruling of Rabbi Rabinowitz from Israel regarding hotel keys, etc. In terms of the card being a legal tender and therefore the money or muktzeh, it's not a muktzeh because it's prepaid and there's only deduction of the amount that you have to pay. What about Uber? Again, if you need to be there, and the only way to get there to study to become a doctor, and it's important, that's something that you could avoid. It could compromise your studies. Then Uber is also a possibility. Preferably do it from before Shabbat. If it's not possible, then it's preferable to do it by using doing voice. Ask Siri to do that for you. It's better than touching the screen. But one has to find a way to do it. I was asked an interesting question by a nurse who had to go back home after her shift. She could not stay. She could not stay in the hospital, and she could not avoid the Shabbat shift. The head nurse was very hostile towards her and towards other Jewish nurses in the hospital, and she says it's impossible. It's impossible for me to stay in the hospital the whole Shabbat. I have family, so the option is finding a ride with someone, or finding a place to sleep there, bringing my husband and the kids over there, or quitting that job, finding another job. And my answer to her was, you have the same status as doctors today in a modern hospital. Nurses and doctors work in unison. If the nurses are not there, the doctors cannot do their work, and therefore you have the same level of flexibility in getting to the hospital and getting back. Again, learning the methods of transportation that are best for you. And like we have a comment here, where there's a will, there's a way. 100%. This is something that I've written about in articles about halakha and also in classes. When I will just paraphrase it, when the rabbi recognized the problem, there is a solution. Whenever the rabbis would look at a situation and say, here is a problem, and there's a problem that we have to address, a solution will be found. It will be found through legal fiction. It will be found by bending corners here or there, but also seeing the balance between what needs to be done and what are the prohibitions that we perceive, and we could solve that. So we'll go back to the text, and the Shulchan Aruch, following the Gemara, speaks also about malpractice. Im ripa shelo birshut bedin hayav betashlumin afilu im hu baki, v'im ripa birshut bedin v'ta'ah v'hizik patur midinei adam v'hayav bedinei shamayim. So if one became a doctor and was engaged in healing without the permission of bedin, of the court, which today would be the board and doing all the exams, etc., and even if he's knowledgeable, but he caused damage to the patient, he must pay damages. But if he had the permit and he made a mistake and caused damage, he cannot be charged by a human court. But if he is responsible, God will punish him. This is what the Shulchan Aruch says. This is very interesting because it's totally different than what we know today, especially in America, with the malpractice. That doctors, hospitals sometimes have to pay millions of dollars. This is something that would not be looked at favorably by Judaism. And you talk to doctors and to lawyers, we understand that it bogs down the system. We cannot change it. The idea of the Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara, when they said that, their rationale was this: if you, unless it's criminal negligence. Right? We're talking about an error, that something that was not done deliberately. Unless it's criminal negligence, if you will charge the doctor for every mistake that he does, it will turn him away from practicing medicine, and eventually everybody will suffer from that. So what happens today, because of those lawsuits and the exaggerated amounts of money that is being paid, the doctors have to pay more in insurance, and then patients have to pay more to the doctors. The whole system is clogged. And I have a friend who was a doctor and became a lawyer to be involved in medical lawsuits, says it makes more money that way. So he's not my friend anymore. But no, I'm kidding. I don't know. I don't remember who told me that. But I know of cases like that. So that's interesting. Like the Shulchan Aruch deals with that issue. It was an issue back then, and this is something that, even with our society today, with the way it's done in the United States, you ask yourself sometimes, where are the checks and balances? Does someone stop for a second to review the whole system and say, okay, who gains and who loses with this system? So, just a voice from the past, sort of, from the Shulchan Aruch that we don't follow today. In Seif Bet and Seif Gimel, we have a classical example of the ambiguity in which the Shulchan Aruch leaves us. In Seif Bet, he says this: "Harofeh asur litol schar hachokma ve'alimud, aval schar hatorah ve'abatala mutar." The doctor cannot charge for his knowledge and for the time he spent learning. Even if he studied 7 years, he cannot come to you and say, "Okay, I've learned 7 years to take care of you. You have to pay it back to me." But he's allowed to take time. It is allowed to be paid for his time, meaning he could say, instead of being a doctor, I could have been working in something else and making money. So you have to pay me for not doing that and taking care of you. So the Shulchan Aruch leaves us with this understanding that there is a very limited fee that the doctor should charge, and the commentators actually say that afal gav the enkan shum Torah. This is not something that's mentioned in the Torah, but the understanding is that since we're talking about a damage that could happen to someone, and the Torah says you have to return a lost object to the owner. If you can return the use of one's body to him, it's like returning a lost object. And so this is the mitzvah of returning a lost object. And just as you cannot charge for a mitzvah, you cannot charge for this as well. But that's not the end of this halakha, because if we follow that, doctors wouldn't be able to charge anything today, or they would be able to charge the minimum wage, which is schar haTorah v'batala. If the doctor says, I could have done something else, so okay, take the minimum. Well, I don't know what other work you could have done. But in Saif Gimel we read this: Mi shesh lo samanim v'havero chole v'tzarich lahem asur lo la'alo b'dmeim yoter min ha'roi. If you have a medicine that your friend needs, you are not allowed to charge a higher price for them. And not only that, even if the patient offers you more money, you can't take more than the market price. That's an interesting discussion that is not within our reach or our control about controlling the price of pharmaceuticals. Do you get it from Canada? Do you get it from South America? When we live there, you could get anything from the pharmacy, but they would tell you could go to this one because probably it's the right medicine. In other places, you don't know what's in it. It's also the famous Heinz dilemma of that you're being taught in I think Philosophy 101 about what happens when someone needs a certain medicine, it's extremely expensive, and then he steals it. Is it okay? Is it not? It's not okay. But the Shulchan Aruch also says you cannot charge too much. It continues to say, "Imitna b'schar rofeh harbe hayav liten lo, shechochmato machar lo ve'en lo damim." Says if someone promised to give the doctor a certain amount of money, he must give him because the doctor gave him his wisdom, and that cannot be evaluated. There's no value to that. So the interesting thing that we see here is the Shulchan Aruch seems to contradict himself. In two consecutive passages. In one he says the doctor cannot be paid for his wisdom, and in the following he says if you agreed with the doctor to pay for his wisdom, you have to pay it because this is something that you cannot put a price for, right? What happens here? Most probably it's two different opinions that evolved over time. One is from a time where the knowledge of medicine was still, as I said, like stagnant, and then when people started recognizing that certain doctors, certain people know better than others, and they live in different societies. The Shulchan Aruch, what he does here is systematic. If you listen to the other series of Introduction to Halacha and the discussion of Rabbi Yosef Karo, you will see that it is a sort of a system. There's the methodology of the Shulchan Aruch is to leave things open, and that is his greatness. Briefly, I'll say that the Rambam Maimonides tried to create a monolithic halacha, one halacha for all, whereas the Tur who came after him created an anthology of halacha, putting together 5-6 opinions, not telling you what to do. And both of them did not become books that everybody followed. Rabbi Yosef Karo decided to merge both systems. He didn't want to give you a final halacha without any options, but he wanted to give a sense of a ruling. So he does that. He says the doctors should not charge money, but if he sells his wisdom, you must pay him. So it leaves this wiggle room of judging between doctors and their quality and their knowledge, and understanding that you have to pay for these services. Okay, I'm just a comment about the question that was raised before about transgressing Shabbat in order to study medicine. I answered the question as it was asked, saying, assuming that there are such conditions. It might be something that really is extreme. It's hard to imagine such a situation that there's no other way to accomplish your studies on your medical studies unless you transgress Shabbat, and that's a comment that comes from someone who is observant and who did his medical studies under difficult conditions and did not transgress Shabbat. I just said that in case that happens, in case that that comes up, one should really study all the elements of what has to be done, and if there's no other way, then this is what he should do. But like I said, it seems extremely rare to be in a situation where there's no other way to study medicine unless you transgress Shabbat. Well, let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. We are on 336. That we spoke about the Shulchan Aruch says on one hand you can't pay the doctor, then says you can't pay the doctor. So if you want to know, okay, what do I do today? Of course, you pay the doctor. Hopefully, you have insurance. Maybe the insurance companies should study those halachot and decide, okay, what is the best way to make sure that everybody has proper medical treatment. In 337, we read Choleshem. It's only one entry, one saif. Choleshem met lomet en modi'inoto shemet itarev da'ato alav. This unfortunately is very common today. If someone is ill and someone passed away in his family, you do not inform that person, and you act as everything is normal around him because we're afraid that the knowledge will throw him into a situation that is mental situation, will cause him physical problems, and that something that he cannot tolerate, and that of course has to be done with great wisdom and sensitivity. And if there's a chaplain or a counsel, use their services and to help them to do that. Siman Shin Lamet Het. This is towards the final simanim that speak about someone who's ill, and that's vidui. I will just ask a question today about the different practices between the Ashkenazi and the Iranian community. I don't know much about what the Iranian community does with vidui, but let's read this and I'll tell you what I feel about the vidui. So the Shulchan Aruch says, "Natal lamut omrim lo hidvadeh." When we see that someone is on his deathbed, is about to die, we tell him, say the vidui, ashamnu, bagadnu, etc. V'omrim lo harbe hidvadu velo metu, v'harbe shelo hidvadu metu. You have to say, don't worry about that. This is not what's going to cause your death. There were many who did the vidui and did not die, and others who didn't do it and did die, and that was actually bring you to life, and you'll have share for Olam Haba. And if you can't do it verbally, orally, say it in your heart. וכל אלו הדברים אין לומרים לו בפני עם הארץ ולא בפני נשים ולא בפני קטנים שמא יבכו וישברו ליבו. But you don't say these things when there are people there who are ignorant, or women or children. See that this they put them all in the same category as people who do not understand. That was the perspective back then. And so what is the vidui? Here's the vidui mentioned in Seif Bet. Modian lefanecha Hashem Eloheinu v'Elohe avotai. I confess in front of you, Hashem, my God of my father, that my healing and my death is in your hand. May it be your will to give me, to grant me speedy recovery, full and good health. But if I die, let my death be an atonement for all the sins and the transgressions that I have committed, and may I have a share in the Garden of Eden and in the Olam Haba, the world to come, which is reserved for the righteous. So this is tradition. It's not a mitzvah. It's mentioned in halacha. There, I personally, I've been with people many times in those moments, and I didn't feel that this is the right thing to do, to ask them to say a vidui, but rather, instead of using the formula like that, definitely would say the prayer, would say the Shema together, and instead of saying vidui with that format, which is somewhat rigid and sort of like, when you say that, you think, okay, so did everyone who passed away just said the same words? It's just like another prayer, another technical thing, another card that you have to punch before you move on. Instead, you could say, are there things that you want to say to people around you? Is there a special message that you want to deliver? Is there something that that you would like to engage that person in conversation to bring them to the point where they would say maybe that they want to regret about something, but not push them in a way of making it such a technicality. But again, to each his own. Some people would feel that is the appropriate things to do, and some people would ask you to do it. Depends on their upbringing. I've been in a situation where people said, okay, help me read the Shema, help me read the Vidui. Of course, you do that. Whatever they ask you to do, you do with them. Now, here we come to the to halacha that is very relevant today, and that is the halacha of goses, the one who is dying, and the question of hastening the moment of death. The technology or whatever the means people had back then cannot be compared to what happens today. We know that today, in certain situations, people could stay on life support for years, and there are legal debates. There are fights with the family, with religious institutions, what to do. The Shulchan Aruch, following the Gemara, tells us the following: someone who is dying is considered a living person. He is alive and up until the last breath that he has. So you can't do anything that usually is done for the body after someone passes away, which is they would tie the cheeks to make sure that the jaws don't open. They would anoint the body and wash the body for good odor. They would seal certain parts of the body, remove the pillow, put the body on sand or on the ground to remain cool. They would put on the body vessels with water to make it cold. They would spread the rumor in town that someone passed away. Would rent or hire bagpipe players and women to say the eulogy, and close the eyes of the person who died. It says, and anyone who closes the eyelids of a person who didn't die yet is a murderer. One cannot do kri'ah, cannot bear the shoulder, cannot say a eulogy, cannot bring a coffin into the house until that person dies. And you don't say tziduk adin, which is the phrase that we say, we accept the judgment of Hashem in that case until that person dies. So that seems as this is an absolute prohibition of doing anything that could cause that person to die sooner than what he would have with his life support. However, the Haggah, Rabbi Moshe Israelis, continues with something that is mentioned in the Gemara and also in the Rif. Here we read this at the end of the Rema on Seif 339. We're on 339, Seif Aleph. He says this: Im yesh sham davar shegorem ikuv yetziat hanefesh. But if there is something there that prevents the soul from departing. Okay, so the difference between what we read before and this is that earlier the Shulchan Aruch spoke about a physical action that causes the person to die earlier, right? And here they talk about stopping something that is that prevents the person from dying. So removing a block, sort of. כגון שיש סמוך לאותו בית כל דופק כגון חוטב עצים, או שיש מלח על לשונו ואלו מעכבים יציאת הנפש, מותר להסירו משם. So the one example is brought in the Gemara, which is a sound. There's a constant sound that keeps someone alive. 1 second. There's a constant sound that keeps someone alive. in this case, it's someone who's a lumberjack. He hears the sound of the axe on the wood, constant sound, and that keeps him alive. So as long as, or they mention also a blacksmith hitting the anvil, and it's obvious that this person is alive. His soul clings to life because of the anvil. Are you allowed to go out and tell the blacksmith, please stop doing that, so that person could die? So there's actually a story like that in the Talmud. It's a very famous story about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi, who was ill for a very long time. Some say 13 years, but at one point it became so, the illness was so severe that it was really suffering and crying. And meanwhile, in the hall, in the study hall, in the Bet Midrash, people were studying and praying to Hashem to preserve the life of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And therefore, he was hanging between life and death. This is really Rabbi Yehuda Nasi on life support. He wants to die, but the prayer of the people is preventing from his life from departing. So there was one man there who was a simple man who was used to wash clothes for others. It was a koves, and that koves, that washer, went up the roof to the roof of the Beit Midrash where everybody was praying, and threw himself down. And of course, when he hit the ground and died, there was a ruckus. Everybody got excited. What's going on? Everybody ran out, and of course, at that moment, everybody stopped learning, stopped praying, and immediately a announcement came from the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi that he passed away, because this koves managed to stop people from praying, and he cut the life support of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And at that time, the Gemara says, a heavenly voice came and said, that koves, that man, with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi are going together to Olam Haba. So the heavenly voice approved of his action. So when we go back now to the Shulchan Aruch, chapter 339, Saif Aleph, and we see what the Rama says. It says you're allowed to remove something that holds one soul in place. One is that sound. The other one, sheyesh melech al leshono. They would put like a grain of salt on his tongue. It says you could remove it because the body, the soul already wants to depart, but we're delaying it there. So, in practical terms, what do you do when someone asks, the family members ask, what should we do with life support? So it's important to let people know that they have the option of signing a DNR, do not resuscitate, to prevent them from getting to the point of being of depending on life support. And it's important to do it in a stage of life when someone is still in control of his mental capacities. And then, God forbid, if something happens that and someone is in a situation where he's on life support, and you, as the rabbi or as the chaplain or the counselor, has to talk to them, we have to let them know that there are options, that there are things that they can do, that we put this material in front of them. Also, there's a teshuvah by Rabbi Haim Ovadia, who was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, based on that Gemara that says that we should not cause more suffering to a person by forcing the soul, this resemblance of life, to stay there against its will. However, this is not a question of yes and no. It's not that we say, like people say it very offhandedly, pull the plug. You're not pulling the plug. We can't pull the plug on someone's life. It's a very, very serious decision. And whenever I had to deal with that, I would tell the family that at the end of the day, it's their decision. They have to sit, if they have to sit with their relative and try to feel what, if that person could still communicate something, what is it that he or she would have wanted. they have to ask themselves what is it that they want to do and consult the doctors and try to understand that. And then it's their decision, because they have to live with it to the end of their life, thinking of, have we done something wrong, or this was the right thing to do. But it's important to know that you have the spectrum in halakha that you could actually discuss this issue. So we'll return to the Shulchan Aruch now. The same chapter, 339. We really touched very briefly on that very difficult issue of life support, but really, as I said, it's not a simple decision, but a process. But it's important to know all the factors and know that there are options, and of course, most preferable is to advise people to be on that DNR. סעיף ב', אוקיי. סעיף ג' אומרים צידוק הדין עם יציאת הנשמה, וכשמגיע לדיין אמת קורע האבל. Says if one is present when his relative passes away, he has to tear his garments when the person dies. And he says דיין האמת זרוך אתה השם אלוקינו מלך העולם דיין האמת. This is the tziduk adin that the Shulchan Aruch refers to, the bracha. Blessed are you, God, the true judge. And you do the kriyah right there. From what I know, it is not very common today. People don't do it in the hospital or in the house, wherever they are. Rav Binyamin is with us. Do people do that? Did you see that? I'm sorry, someone was in Hava Kadisha. Okay. If you know, let me know. I have not seen that being done, of people doing kiriyah in the hospital or like at the deathbed, and not also what was mentioned in the Tannaitic sources that that if you're there, even if you're not a relative, but you have to do the kiriyah for someone who passes away. Okay, so I hear from some participant that they did that. I don't know what I would have done. I wasn't when my mother passed away. I wasn't there. She passed away in Israel. I was in Los Angeles. It was very tough, but like people are mentioning here, this seems to be the halacha, but with kiriyah, the borders between halacha and practice and norms are blurred, because we don't do kiriyah the way people did back then. People used to hold their clothes and tear them all, like rip them off their bodies as a sign of agony, and we do it in a more symbolic way that for us brings that agony, because this is what it stands for and this is what it stood for throughout all these generations. We don't do what the Masechet Tzemachot mentions of sewing it back and wearing it again or selling it. We live in a different within a different construct, but that is I think given to the minhag and practice of each person. I see that there's a comment here, which is a good question. What is the proper way to judge whether there is a chance that the person would come back? There's no proper way. This is like I said. This is something that we have to discuss with the families and let them make the decision. And I'm saying let them make the decision because in many cases people will make the decision anyway. They want to hear the opinion of halacha, but sort of to quiet to calm their conscience. And they will do what they think is right. And I had situations where people called me and say, one particular case, mom is sick, she's in the hospital. I said, you want me to come? No, don't come yet. And then, like 2 hours later, you could come now. No, and it was obvious that in between they made the decision and they told the doctor to do that. They didn't want to ask anyone. So this is a gray zone where it's you really have to navigate and you have to gauge the situation and talk to the family and try to come to the best decision. We'll finish this Siman 3, we're still in 339 in Yoreh De'ah. כיוון שנטע אדם למות, אין רשאים להיפרד ממנו כדי שלא תצא נפשו והוא יחיד. It's a beautiful, beautiful halacha that says that when a person is nearing the moment of death, and we're in the room, we don't leave. We stay there for that person. So, שלא תצא נפשו והוא יחיד. We don't want that person to die in loneliness. It's amazing halacha that shows great sensitivity that one should not say, even if you don't know that person, even if you don't know who he is, but this is a very sad, very tragic moment where a human soul departs from that world, and it will be so much more tragic if that person has no one next to him or her to be with them. So even till the last moment, the halacha here mentions the importance of friendship and companionship of us as human beings, of taking care of each other. And finally, the last halacha on chapter 339, midnahag lishpoch kol hamayim hasha'uvim shebishchunat hamet. There's a custom of to spill all the water, all the drawn water that are in the neighborhood of the dead person. So the definition of shechuna, the commentators explain that shechuna is 2 houses to each side or 3 houses to each side. But the reason for spilling the water, there are many different explanations trying to say that it's the symbol of life, etc. But really, it's a minhag that came from a German pagan practice, because they said that the reason that is brought in the commentary is that Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, polishes his knife or his sword and uses water to do that, and that's the water that is in the neighborhood of the dead. And they said that drops of blood fall into the water. When you do the research, you will find out that that was a practice among the pagan German tribes to spill the water, and it was not always when someone died, but it had to do with the cycle of the sun, the solar cycle, at a certain what is called the tkufa. In any case, this is a halacha that is based mostly on superstition and paganism. If one wants to do it, feeling that I'm following the tradition of my forefathers, you're entitled to do that. However, most of us don't have drawn water at home. We have the water from the faucet. They're in closed containers, and there is no problem with that. So with that, we conclude chapter 339. But as I said, next week, because of Thanksgiving, the class will maybe take place on a Tuesday. I will let people know. And we'll continue with Shulchan Aruch, chapter 340, Hilchot Kirya. So with that, everybody good evening, good night, and Shabbat Shalom.